Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. And this week I want to dive into how societal norms keep us from being who we came here to be. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I was inspired by a video I saw this week, which I'll get into in just a moment. And it made me really understand that we're not necessarily immune to this no matter who we are, because the example that I got inspired by was someone that's pretty profound, someone who's pretty famous, and even they were suggestive of places where they're supposed to be a certain way or a certain thing, and they'll have a lot of judgment passed on them because they're not that certain thing or that certain thing or that certain person. And so I want to just dive into a little bit more about how societal norms truly drive us. And then when we wake up to that and we realize, perhaps we're not happy or we don't feel fulfilled, it's a lot of times because we sort of just fell in line with this societal norms thing. And then on top of it, we're not happy because we realize it's totally, if we did fall into it and we did become what the societal norm was supposed to be, then we realize how unhappy that makes us. Or we're fine, we're happy, but we're letting outside or external judgments drive our happiness because we are getting into a place where like, well, gee, I don't have X or I don't have Y or I'm not this or I'm not that. And that is what's driving our unhappiness because we feel inadequate because we're not fulfilling a societal norm versus fulfilling a soul desire. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And before we get started, I want to just offer you a quick reference in my bio or in the show notes where you can go check it out and get a quick reference on getting started on honoring yourself. So if you're interested in, I get it. I get the concept. I understand I need to honor myself more in life. How do I do that? Go grab the freebie in my show notes, and that'll get you started on how to truly honor yourself. It also gives you a little snapshot of my story and how I got started doing this and why I even do what I do. So yeah, go grab that. And as far as what's going on, not a ton going on other than in the coming weeks, I will relaunch the Honor You Lab. So if you missed it the first time and you'd like to get in the Honor You Lab, this is the space where we create the life that you truly want. Honoring yourself and learning how to do that is such a profound way to live. And it's nothing that we're taught proactively in life. We're not taught it in school. Typically our parents don't teach us how to do this, especially if you fall within that Gen X, millennial bucket. The Gen Zers are probably coming forward and being encouraged to be who they really want to be, but we didn't grow up that way. So it's not something that we're to blame. It's just something that we need to learn how to do so that we can live the next part of our lives truly becoming who we came here to be, and really having that ability or having that tool or that blueprint or that operating system, whatever you want to call it, having that available to us to show us how we truly lean into and become who we came here to be. So if you're interested in getting into the lab the next time, we're having an amazing time in the current lab. So many breakthroughs, so many things that people are addressing and changing in their life to truly honor themselves so that they can have a fulfilling and amazing life. So if you're interested in that, there's also going to be a link in the show notes that puts you on the wait list so that you are the first to know when the doors open again. So don't miss your chance for that. Get on the list. Don't delay. Okay, let's get into it. So again, I want to touch on how societal norms keep us from being who we came here to be. And one of the famous examples that triggered me to think about talking about this was Simon Sinek. If you don't know who Simon Sinek is, Google him. He's a very prolific and profound voice of today's day and age. He's very much into self-development and leadership and really leading from an authentic place. He's a really cool guy, got lots of books, does leadership training, has an online platform, all the things. But Simon was in an interview recently, and he was talking about how he's not married or hasn't ever been married. And he was saying how he will go on dates and he will literally be asked, have you ever been married before? And he says, no, I've never been married before. And the person literally says, well, what's wrong with you? Oh my gosh. So it's fascinating, right? It's because the societal norm says you should get married at a young age. And if you don't, there clearly or must be something wrong with you. And so he went on to say that, one of his friends has been married for a very long time, and she's been unhappy in that marriage for 85% of the time that she's been married. She's been married for many years, like over a decade, many years. And so he was saying, what's wrong in that situation? Is it I'm wrong because I've never been married? Or is she wrong because she's been in a marriage, she's been married, she got married at a fairly young age, and yet she's been unhappy the whole time, right? But society would say there's nothing wrong with her because she went ahead and got married, but there's something wrong with him because he didn't. And yet, who has kind of this more happy life, right? Who is living more authentically themselves? Who is honoring themselves more in that situation? But it's interesting because society would tell us that actually Simon's the weirdo. Simon's the guy that's never been married before. And by the way, I would say he's probably in his 40s, maybe. I would say he's probably in his 40s, maybe later 40s. Don't quote me on that. 40, maybe later 40s, early 50s, I would say. So it's just interesting, right? And so I wanted to talk about this because I think that forming yourself or forming your life around societal norms is how we get into this game of not honoring ourselves, and then we find ourselves in places that aren't fulfilling or a life that doesn't really make us happy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what does that look like? Other examples, other real life examples are when we go to college, we just kind of automatically assume, well, we need to get an education. We need it. Meanwhile, we hate school, or maybe we didn't do very well in school, and forcing ourselves into another 4 years of college or education or getting an education may not be for us. And we see that from a societal standpoint as like the worst thing we can do. Meanwhile, a lot of people in our society that we look up to, Richard Branson, Facebook guy, why can't I think of his name right now? You know who I'm talking about. He didn't go to college. Richard Branson didn't go to college. These guys are multimillionaires, and they didn't go to the university. I think Zuckerberg, that's the Facebook guy, I think Zuckerberg maybe went for a year or something, and then of course Facebook came about and he got out of college. There's many people who do very well for themselves when they don't go to college and or they don't get, these high grades. That's the other thing. It's not only do you need to be in school, but you have to get straight A's. And it's this level of pressure that we are adding to ourselves is quite frankly what's making us very unhappy. There's a lot of people who they want to work with their hands, and the trades is a very, very awesome space to be in, but they could avoid that or abandon that because they're supposed to go to college, right? So I think college is a big one, or education is a big one. I think relationships is a huge one. I mean, I've already touched on that. Simon Sinek, supposed to get married, whatever. I think relationships is a huge thing. I was actually just talking to somebody in my network who's in his early 20s, and he is just stressing to have the highest paying job he can, get the ring for his girlfriend, and buy a house. And it's I don't know, maybe that really is what he wants to do right now in his 20-something-year-old self. But being that I have the perspective of a 20 plus years past him, it's why can't that stuff wait a second? Like, go live your life. Like, the amount of money he's going to put on that down payment on that house, he could like take like 5 or 6 really cool trips and get a great experience. But, it's like, anyway, who knows what's right or wrong? The idea is that we are really focused on certain things because society tells us we're supposed to be, when the reality is we can actually do things that honor ourselves that may or may not fit into societal norms. And that's what I'm really wanting to talk about here. I think that certain spaces to go into are also societal norms. I mean, I think that one's not as bad as it used to be. Back in the day, it was like, be a teacher, be an accountant, be a doctor, be a lawyer. There was very small amount of things that we could go pursue that were what I would say reputable or respectable. And at least that has expanded quite a bit now. I mean, I think you can go get a degree in social media at this point, right? So that has definitely expanded, but I don't know as if it's really trickled down into our youth to show them that there are other things in life that you can do that really connect you with yourself and make you happy. So I think relationships are a big one. I think education is a big one. I think where we live is a big one. A lot of people just rush into going and living in big cities because that's where the opportunity is. And meanwhile, it's just creating complete chaos on our nervous systems and we don't even realize it. Again, because we're not teaching ourselves to connect with who we want to be. Instead, we're sort of buying into what am I supposed to do, right? That's what it's really about. It's like societal norms create this what am I supposed to do situation for ourselves. And then we fulfill that, what am I supposed to do? And then we find ourselves like not really happy or not really fulfilled or not doing the things we really want to do. I think purchasing big things is another big ticket item. Again, I sort of touched on it in the example I just gave, but gotta buy a house, gotta buy a house, buy a house, buy a house, buy a house, buy a house. There's a lot of economic folks out there coming out and saying that actually buying a house isn't necessarily the best move for you economic. I'm not an economic expert, but there's a lot of folks out there saying actually that's just sort of a luxury at this point. Because again, you think about the amount of money you save up as a young person, especially, and then you go to make that big, huge down payment. And there's some economic folks out there saying, actually, if you took that money and you invested it or did something that really made you happy, that's a major difference in your life, right? But making big purchases is probably another one. And if we really think about this, a lot of times our way of acting is very driven by creating a good economy, right? Again, I'm not against that, but obviously if I go buy a house, that keeps the economy running because banks get money borrowed and interest and yada yada. And then of course, like if I go buy a car, same thing. So big, buying a brand new car, like they'll try to tell you, oh, if you buy the car, you'll get a better deal, brand new car. I can't tell you how many times I went to buy a car and they try to convince me that I'll get a better deal if I buy the brand new car. Well, a brand new car is like $20,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 more than a used car. So there's just all these things that come with this societal norm concept. And what is societal norm? Having children. Whoa, that's a big one. I don't have children. Many of you know that. And it's kind of died down at this point because I'm in my 40s. But for so long, it was like, when are you having kids? When are you having kids? When are you having kids? Oh, maybe I don't want kids. Whoa. Right? So a lot of people have children and have families just because they're supposed to. And then they get in that situation and it's tough, right? Like it's tough. I'm not saying that's a bad thing per se, but it is tough. Having kids is really tough. I don't have them, but I know a lot of people who do. Okay, so let's kind of get into, you get the point, right? The point is we do a lot of things in life without question because we haven't been taught to check in with our soul. So we do a lot of things in life just for sake of that's what we're supposed to do, societal norm, right? So how do we reclaim the relationship with ourselves and lead with our soul instead of our mind? Because much of what I just discussed is all mind driven. And then we're like, oh, how did I end up getting into a situation where I'm not very happy? Well, because you let the mind lead the way. You did things that because everybody else is doing it, instead of really checking in with yourself and really having this practice of learning what your soul wants and becoming who you came here to be. Okay. So then we get in these cycles that we can't get out of, that we're frustrated with. So one of the biggest things that I teach, and I teach this in the Honor You Lab, pretty heavy-handedly. And if you hear anything from me, read anything from me, you'll know that one of the biggest things that I say is your purpose in life is to fulfill your soul's desires. Okay? And how do we know what our soul's desires are? How do we do that? Our soul speaks in emotions. So that can basically be the arrow or the pointer or the driver of what makes us happy, right? So if we have a happy emotion, a joyful emotion, a light emotion, a peaceful emotion, okay, that's our soul telling us, hey, I really like this. If we have an emotion that's like, oh, I'm really drained, I'm really tired, I'm really frustrated, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm supposed to. That's your soul being like, hey, buddy, I don't really want to do this. A really great example is for the longest time, I was in corporate America. Again, nothing wrong with corporate America. I learned a lot. I don't regret it. I think it was a great experience. But a lot of the time, I had a lot of stress, a lot of strain, a lot of frustrations. And then I got to the point where I had such acute anxiety, I couldn't even drive my car. You talk about a place and a time in my life where my soul was like, I have had it. I've had it. I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs. My anxiety was so intense, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And that's what put me on my journey to sort of this spiritual awakening and reconnection with myself and being who I really am and becoming who I really came here to be. And it's a hard pill to swallow, right? Because I was a person that very much prided myself in being authentic and being real. I was like, no, I'm a real person. You see, what you see is what you get. I was very proud of that. But what was happening was I was disconnecting from myself so badly when it came to my soul. You know, I was disconnecting from myself so much. And it was mostly because I had a hugely mind-driven approach to life, which was make money, make money, make money, make money, no matter what. Like, it was like, I don't even have this as a hindsight thought. The thought most of my life was, come hell or high water, I'm not going to live paycheck to paycheck. Come hell or high water, I'm going to do what I have to do to not be in a place where I don't have money. So you can imagine that level of a drive and what I was willing to do in order to get that with no connection with myself. Okay. So I want you to understand that your soul speaks in emotions, and paying attention to that every step of the way is the critical piece, and being able to turn inward, not outward, and console yourself through not so fun emotions and pay attention to the good emotions and give yourself more of those, right? And again, I'm not saying like, I'm not the type of person that I'm like, oh, life is rainbows and butterflies. No, this is more so in relation to understanding how you connect with yourself so that even when bad things happen, you have the ability to console yourself. Like, it's not just about what you do for a living or who you marry and those kind of things. It's about really understanding what you truly want and being able to execute on that despite what external things or external people or external circumstances say you should do. Okay. Yeah, I'm not a rainbows and butterflies kind of gal. Life is life, and life is going to life. Things are going to happen in your life that are opportunities that you can then overcome and carry on with life. Okay. So the second thing is having the ability to have a higher self leadership. What do I mean by that? higher self leadership is this ability to understand that you can sort of stand outside of yourself and you can see your mind, your body, and your soul, and you can parent them accordingly to execute on your soul's desires. Because what ends up happening is, and this is the third one, is recognizing when our mind is creating fear to keep us safe. So a lot of what keeps us in the same place doing the same thing is our mind. And a lot of what makes us do things that we don't really necessarily want to do is our mind's worry about, well, what if that person doesn't like us if we don't go do that thing they asked us to do? Or what if mom and dad thinks we're losers because we didn't go to college? Or, what is my parents going to think if I get a divorce? What are people going to think of me? What are my colleagues and all my former colleagues going to think of me if I decide to leave corporate and go do my own thing? And or if I decide to give up a 15, 20-year stint in teaching where I've built up my retirement, but I'm so stressed out with it, I can barely breathe on a daily basis. What is going to happen to my financial status right then? Did I just do that for nothing? I need to suck it up. I need to keep going. I need to muscle through. And so the third thing in this is having this ability to recognize when our mind is creating fear to keep us safe. We create these right or wrong things. We create these, it's going to be bad if I leave my 15-year teaching job when I've built up all this retirement. Earth to you, guys, there's other ways to create retirement, right? So it's one of those things that we buy into these rules and regulations despite them making us very unhappy. And we only have this one life to experience. So why would we use a retirement thing or something in that realm when we're wildly unhappy, And I get it. If you're a year from that, I get it, guys. I get it. But if you're 5, 10, 15 years from that still, really? You're going to spend the next 10, 15 years of your life miserable? Why? Right? So we use this higher self-leadership perspective to see and parent our mind, our body, and our soul. And we see what our soul desires because we're paying attention to our emotions. We see our mind keeping us stuck in the same place, keeping us unhappy. So our higher self has to parent each one of those, console each one of those through a change perhaps that would allow us to be what we want to be and do what we want to do and feel how we want to feel according to our soul instead of caving into the things according to our mind. Got it? So just a recap, how do we reclaim the relationship with ourselves and lead with our soul and not our mind? It's first and foremost understanding that our emotions are our soul speaking to us. So paying attention to when they're down, when they're up, when they're in between, and knowing how to console them and function through any given moment where our emotions are present. And then using our higher self leadership, which is basically kind of this person that stands above it all, kind of like if you picture yourself up on a building or up on a house where you can kind of look down and see what your mind, your body, and soul are doing from as much of an objective point of view as you possibly can take. So it's this non-judgmental, this non-forceful, this just seeing it for what it really is, and then acting accordingly and making decisions at that higher level for yourself instead of at the level of the mind, the body, or the soul, because they've only really got their own interest at hand, right? So a lot of times the mind will try to keep you fearful. A lot of times the emotions from the soul are out of safety or pain or hurt or trauma, and the body is just sort of keeping the score all along the way from those two. So the body will kind of try to, gosh, okay, should we survive? And it'll start creating survival mechanisms accordingly, like the hormone releases and stuff like that. So you have to sort of see it from this objective standpoint that is non-judgmental, because if you don't do that, then you really are going to start making decisions from each one of those without any sort of consideration from the other one. And that's really, it can get you into situations that aren't so great for you. Okay, and so then the third part is recognizing when our mind is really creating fear to keep us safe. when we do things like go to college when we don't really want to, it's our mind being like, oh, you better, or else you'll end up on the streets and you won't have a job and you'll be a loser and everybody think you stink and, you know, you won't have enough money to live your life. And, or if, you know, we want to not be with the person we're in a relationship with, it's like, oh, well, if you get a divorce and you'll lose your friends and you'll lose your house and you'll lose half your money. And like, we really get ourselves wrapped up into these fear-based mantras, and then we lead from there, and then we kind of get stuck in the cycle because we're so afraid to get out of that cycle because of what might happen if we get out of it, right? So we have to be brave enough and take our perspective from that higher self to do what's best for ourselves instead of do what's best for ourselves instead of leading from a place of fear, right? So I'll leave you guys with that, and just consider, you know, in your life, how societal norms are keeping you from being who you came here to be. And if this helps you, or if you've really enjoyed this podcast, I'd love it if you'd share it with somebody. It really helps me in a big way. And or just shoot me a note and tell me what you thought about it. info@melissacoloton.com. Okay, guys, until next time, keep honoring yourself.